0913 hours. International airspace, 70 miles off the coast of Crimea. A British RC-135W Rivet Joint cruises at 26,000 feet, slow and steady, its antennas drinking in every Russian transmission for hundreds of miles. It is a flying ear, not a fist. It carries no missiles, no cannon, nothing that can shoot back. And right now, a Russian Su-30SM is rolling inverted, 15 feet above its canopy, throttles slammed into full afterburner. Two pillars of blue flame erupt over the cockpit. The shockwave drops the 150-ton reconnaissance jet, a sickening 200 feet in barely a breath, and inside the British flight deck, a high, steady tone screams through the pilot's headsets. The Russian has flipped his combat switch. His thumb is resting on the trigger of an R-77 air-to-air missile, and one twitch of that finger turns 30 British crew members into a fireball spreading across the Black Sea. The Russian pulls hard, dives, and comes screaming back nose-on at the British aircraft. Closing speed, over 1,200 miles per hour. The British pilots haul back on the yoke, fighting a wall of dirty air, trying not to be shredded out of the sky by a man who is gambling that NATO will blink first. Here is the math nobody up there has time to do. 30 lives, a reconnaissance platform worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And a single mid-air collision in international airspace that would not stay an accident for long. It would be the spark that drags two nuclear alliances into open war over a patch of water nobody can see from land. There is no eject and reset button on a scenario like this. Whatever happens in the next several minutes happens for the history books. The Russian pilot is certain he is the apex predator in this sky. He has a target, he has a missile, he has the home field advantage of Crimea 20 minutes off his wingtip. What he does not have, what he has not even glanced at his sensor screen long enough to notice, is the pair of digital shadows holding a silent orbit far above the clouds, watching every move he makes in crisp, patient detail. He thinks the sky is empty. He thinks he is alone with his prey. So why is a man with a loaded missile about to become the most helpless aircraft in the Black Sea? And what exactly is the ghost that is already locked onto him from the stratosphere? To understand the Russian pilot's arrogance, you have to understand the game he thinks he's playing. For years, Russian fighters have treated this corner of the Black Sea like a private hunting ground. Crimea sits just over the horizon, bristling with S-400 Triumph surface-to-air batteries around Sevastopol, some of the longest-reaching air defense missiles on the planet, radars that can paint a target nearly 200 miles out. From the Kremlin's view, this is their lake, their fence, their rules. NATO reconnaissance flights are tolerated only so they can be bullied. And the bullying has a method. The Russians don't waste missiles on a slow, lumbering recon plane. They use the aircraft itself as the weapon. A Su-30SM is a 40-ton supersonic predator, twin engines, thrust vectoring, built to dance. The Rivet Joint is none of those things. It is 136 feet of converted airliner designed for endurance, not knife fights. To a fighter pilot, intercepting it is like circling a stray cow. You don't need teeth. You need turbulence. That's the asymmetric trick. A fighter screaming across the nose of a heavy aircraft leaves behind a churning wall of disturbed air-wake turbulence. The same invisible wake a speedboat leaves on water. Hit a small boat with a big wake and it flips. Hit a big aircraft's wing with the wake of a supersonic jet at the wrong angle, and the structure can simply tear apart. No shot fired, no fingerprints. Just an unfortunate accident over international waters, and a story the world can never quite prove. The Russian high command is betting everything on one belief: that the West is too frightened of escalation to ever push back. That they can fly this close, this aggressively, and the worst they'll face is a strongly worded letter. They've named this style of intimidation nothing. It's just Tuesday to them. A routine flexing of a wolfpack over its territory. But confidence built on the assumption that no one is watching is the most fragile thing in the sky. Because someone is. And they have been watching for a while. 0928 hours. The first Su-30SM is no longer alone. A second fighter blooms onto the British radar, sliding into formation, and suddenly the math has changed. 2-on-1, the Russians begin a pincer. One jet tucks tight off the Rivet Joint's left wing, close enough that the British crew can read the stenciling on its fuselage. The other slips back and low, dropping into the 6 o'clock position, the dead zone directly behind the tail where the heavy aircraft has no eyes. This is how you hurt a plane. You crowd one side, you blind the other, and you wait for the prey to panic into a turn. Then the thumping starts. The lead Su-30SM accelerates across the British nose, again and again, each pass leaving that churning wake. The Rivet Joint's 4 engines gulp at the dirty, broken air and shudder. The British pilots are sawing at the controls just to hold altitude, every muscle fighting a machine that suddenly weighs nothing and everything at once. The Russians aren't defending airspace anymore. They are manufacturing a crash. But while two wolves circle the cow, neither of them is reading his own sensor screen. And miles above, in a silent orbit at the edge of the stratosphere, 2 U.S. Air Force F-35 Lightning IIs have been recording all of it in 4K clarity. Radars off, antennas retracted. In stealth mode, an F-35 doesn't bounce a radar pulse back to its sender, it scatters that energy sideways into empty sky. So to the Russians, the airspace above reads as nothing at all. A flashlight sweeping a dark forest and finding no one. Meanwhile, the Lightning sensors are so sensitive, they can register the heat bleeding off a cockpit from 50 miles out. The American lead doesn't arm a weapon. He flips on the multifunction advanced data link. In an instant, 2 stealth fighters and 1 British recon jet fuse into a single nervous system. The Rivet Joint, the most powerful set of ears in the sky, pipes the exact coordinates of both Su-30S into the F-35S. The F-35S, the most powerful eyes, feed crystalline visual tracks back. 3 aircraft, 1 mind. The Russians are now fighting an enemy that knows where they are before they know it themselves. The lead Russian decides the games are over. He paints the Rivet Joint with his fire control radar, the electronic equivalent of thumbing back the hammer on a revolver, and then the impossible happens. His radar screen, the one he's using to aim that R-77, dissolves into static. Where there was 1 British plane, there are now 100, blinking in and out, some streaking past at 4,000 miles per hour, some frozen dead still. This is the AN/ASQ-239 electronic warfare suite reaching into his computer and pouring lies into it, populating his sky with targets that do not exist. He switches to his infrared search and track, hunting heat instead of radio waves, and finds the F-35s have already slid into a sun-blind perch. The blazing sun parked directly behind them, drowning his heat seekers in glare. He has every weapon in the world and no way left to aim a single one. If watching a man with a missile go completely blind in real time is your idea of a good morning, sound off in the comments and let us know, because the Russian pilot is about to find out that being blind was the kindest part of his day. From out of that same wall of sunlight, an F-35 carves across his flight path at 900 miles per hour and snaps into a high G brake turned 50 feet off his canopy. The American didn't fire. He used the raw pressure wave of his own airframe to physically shove the Su-30 off balance, rolling it hard left. Before the Russian can recover, the second Lightning materializes on his opposite side, sandwiched. The 2 F-35s pivot on their thrust vectoring nozzles, keeping their noses and their aim 120D AMRA AMMs pointed at his cockpit no matter how he twists. It is a knife fight where the other man already has a pistol against your temple, and you haven't even opened your blade. 0956 hours. The Russian is being herded now, pushed lower and lower toward the water. Climb, and the F-35s cut him off. Turn back toward the British plane, and they dive across his line. He is panicking, jamming his stick from corner to corner, and from the west comes the heavy artillery of the electronic war, a U.S. Navy EA-18G Growler, ALQ-99 jamming pods slung beneath its wings, each one generating enough raw power to light a small city. The Growler swings its beams onto the S-400 batteries ringing Sevastopol, and the entire coastal air defense network simply goes dark. The operator's screens vomit false contacts by the thousands. To the men on the ground, it looks like 500 NATO bombers have appeared out of clean air. They cannot fire a single surface-to-air missile because they no longer know which blip is a ghost and which is real. The whole peninsula has gone blind in one stroke. Then the Growler narrows a beam onto the Su-30's own radio. The pilot's headset doesn't fill with static, it fills with his own voice, played back at a 3-second delay. He can't reach his base. He can't reach his wingman. He is alone inside his own helmet. And now comes the part the Russian never imagined was possible. Everyone knows the Rivet Joint listens. Almost no one knows it can also speak not in words, but in code. It carries a system called Su-30. Su-30 is not a sensor. It is a weapon that fires nothing but data packets. The RC-135W can reach through a Russian fighter's own radar antenna and log into its flight computer, a wireless intruder cruising at 500 miles an hour. For the last several minutes, while the Russian thought he was the hunter, the British plane has been quietly injecting instructions into the brain of his aircraft. His cockpit erupts in warning lights. His engines spool down 30% as the flight computer suddenly believes it is in an emergency landing sequence. The jet starts fighting its own pilot, trying to drop landing gear at near supersonic speed, throttling itself back, second-guessing every command he gives it. He wrestles a machine that has stopped taking orders from the man strapped inside it. The F-35s hold his tail, watching him fight his own airplane in no hurry whatsoever. They are not even toying with him anymore. They are simply observing the result. The Russian pilot who flipped a combat switch to terrorize an unarmed plane has become the most helpless aircraft over the Black Sea. He has the missile. He always had the missile. What he never had was a machine he could trust. The Su-30SM limps toward the edge of Crimean airspace, sensors fried, engines coughing, reputation in ruins, physically shoved out of a sky he thought he owned by a force he never saw until it was sitting on top of him. But Russian high command, staring at a radar picture, screaming 500 Phantom bombers and unable to raise its own fighters, does what panic always does. It scrambles everything. 10 more jets, Su-27S and Su-35S, roar off the Crimean runways looking for revenge. By 10-20 hours, they cross the coastline and they hit a wall of steel. In the 20 minutes since the first intercept, NATO has quietly moved a full strike package into the sector. Holding station just outside the Russian missile envelope are 4 US F-15E Strike Eagles, 6 British Eurofighter Typhoons, and 2 B-1B Lancers, the loudest, fastest, most intimidating bombers on Earth, flying at 30,000 feet with every radar and every light switched on. They want to be seen. The Russian fighters, outnumbered and outclassed 5-1, freeze. They circle for 3 minutes, paralyzed, doing the only math left to them. Attack a force this size and you start a war you will lose in the first 10 minutes. So they watch. They watch as the British RC-135W calmly finishes its mission, turns for home, and departs behind a literal wall of escorting steel. By trying to scare one defenseless plane, Russia accidentally invited half the US and British air forces to its own doorstep. The B-1Bs bank west, 4 engines shaking the air for 50 miles, and leave a new truth behind them. The Black Sea is not a Russian lake. The red line wasn't moved, it was reinforced with stealth and titanium. And here is the lesson the Russian pilot will carry forever. In 21st century warfare, the deadliest weapon isn't the one that goes boom. It's the one that turns your own machine against you, that hacks the device you're strapped into before you can ever reach the trigger. He thought he was flying a fighter. He was flying a hacked smartphone with afterburners. So I'll leave it with you. If you'd been in that cockpit watching your own jet betray you, would you have kept flying? Or punched out the second the lights came on? Drop your call in the comments, and if you want this crew watching your 6, you already know what the like and subscribe buttons are for. Stay locked on, because the next ghost over the Black Sea won't announce itself either. This is a hypothetical dramatization built on real aircraft, real systems, and very real tensions. A what if, not a report of actual events.